Man, you know what I could go for today? Some Gran Turismo 5. Just really feeling that PS3 game that wants to be photorealistic but just can't quite hack it on that hardware kind of vibe.
Why are companies so dead set on taking backwards compatibility from us? Right, okay, that's a generalization. And just a straight up lie. I get it's a hard thing to implement. It can require countless months of research, reverse engineering, testing, developing an emulator for a well-documented 40-year-old console that you made.
Backwards compatibility is a pretty simple concept when you actually think about it. It's like the ability to play GameCube games on the Wii, or PC games on the PC. Playing older games on newer systems. A feature that everyone wants, a feature that everyone asks for, a feature that everyone is excited when it gets announced, and then a feature that no one actually uses when it actually gets implemented.
Yeah, this, let's play some Tears of the Kingdom.
A simple answer to this. Everyone wants the new thing. Because why would I use backwards compatibility on my PS5 to play God of War 2018 when I could instead play God of War Ragnarok? That's like... relatively newer. I mean, you could argue enhancements to the game, the extra horsepower from the PS5, just the ability to play through your backlog on a convenient system, but spoilers! Let's just take it from the top. Go from there.
It's important before we begin to establish that there are two different types of backwards compatibility. The first is implementing it into the hardware, essentially baking all of the elements the previous generation of games would need to run into your new machine. And then there's the coward's way out. To emulate your game is to run software to trick the game into thinking it's on an older console. You know, like how you can draw a square around a cat and trick it into thinking it's trapped? Like that, but a little bit less humane.
Good God. Just think about the deep psychological damage you're creating in that video game.
Theoretically, it's a lot easier to emulate a game than to develop actual hardware support for backwards compatibility. Emulators are software. It's like a virtual version of the target console, so it's a lot easier to program a piece of software to trick a game rather than the nuclear option of just remaking the console. But it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. It actually sucks. Like, a lot.
So much! You know, I can always tell when a game's running via backwards compatibility. There's just these little telltale signs that just tip me off and let me know initially. Like, for example, Mario Kart Wii. I can tell that this is being emulated because I'm using a GameCube controller on the Wii. Checkmate! Those are pretty much the two types of backwards compatibility. But why waste all the time explaining what emulation is and what backwards compatibility actually is when I could just dive straight into explaining why it's important? Because people hate emulated backwards compatibility.
Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but there's a certain degree of second-rate emulated backwards compatibility compared to the real deal. The Wii U has full, non-emulated Wii backwards compatibility, and so does the 3DS for DS games, the DS for GBA games, the Wii for GameCube games, and those are often lauded as some of the best features for those consoles. In theory.
Pure whiff. Smells like foreshadowing.
Meanwhile, the Xbox 360 can emulate a decent chunk of the original Xbox library, and not a single soul cares. Granted, I think more care about the emulated backwards compatibility of original Xbox, Xbox 360, and Xbox One games on the Series X. My god, they have got to sack the marketing department.
So is backwards compatibility only important when it's not emulated? Well, I'd argue no, but it's like my relationship status. Single. Wait, no, it's supposed to be complicated. Whatever. I think a lot of people are interested in completely pure, non-emulated backwards compatibility because theoretically, it reduces the chances of any weird glitches that can come up during emulation. And it has the added bonus of keeping the bloodline pure, so if you're into that, be my guest.
I think my dad would describe emulators as having a rick in them.
Hey Dad! Describe an emulator! What the f*** is an emulator? Thanks, Dad.
Most official emulators are fine, or as fine as they can be at least. I remember the N64 emulator as part of the Nintendo Switch Online service having a bunch of issues at launch, but I think they've mainly been patched out now. I think. Usually most official emulators are okay from the go at launch, emphasis on that usually, but getting every game to run at perfect quality, no bugs caused by the emulation, quality either level with or beyond the original console, because that seems to be a trend now, versus the game just running because you basically baked the original console into the new one.
Yeah, I see why people might be opposed to this now. With consoles like the NES and the SNES, otherwise known as the yes, you really have been alive that long consoles, people know how to get a tune out of those emulators no matter what hardware they're running on. These consoles have been documented to shit, fiddled with to shit. People know how these things work by now. But meanwhile, something like the PS4 takes a Herculean effort to develop and run an emulator for, which Sony produced to a staggering quality on the PS5.
I think on a technical level, aside from a massive performance difference, the PS4 and PS5 are quite similar, just not similar enough to go full native backwards compatibility. So at the very least, some emulation is involved, but to be honest, no one can f***ing tell. It's seriously impressive. The PS4 couldn't pull this off with the PS3 because the PS3 CPU was designed by a couple of guys on crack over a weekend. So to see Sony wake up and go full commitment to backwards compatibility again is great to see.
Yeah. That's why we brought back backwards compatibility. Yeah, because of the fans. That's why we did it. Yeah.
But back to the point, the PS5's backwards compatibility works really well, and even enhances certain games. Like the aforementioned God of War 2018, you can run the game in an enhanced performance mode, which essentially merges the 4K resolution mode with a 60fps performance mode. So now the game can run in 4K 60, it's never looked better, etc, etc, but who gives a because God of War Ragnarok has just hit store shelves, and it looks even better. Who cares about PS4 games, because the new hit game God of War Ragnarok is out for the public. Let's go!
Again, noticing a problem here. Backwards compatibility has this major flaw that covers all bases. All emulators, all Switch Online apps, all native hardware-based backwards compatibility. It's that people don't care about older games when new ones release. Obviously, that's a generalization, it's made up for dramatic effect, and yada, but to an extent, it's true. Don't deny it. People would much rather use their newer consoles for newer games.
Quick analogy, parents have a child. It's all well and good with a child developing nicely, but it gets completely overthrown with the announcement that a currently untitled sequel to Child is in development. All of a sudden, no one gives a f*** about Child 1. All they can talk about is the details of Child 2. What's the title? Are the same voice actors back on board? Will there be DLC add-ons? Are the cosmetics purchased for Child 1 going to carry over to Child 2? And very quickly, no one wants to play Child 1 anymore because the sequel is out and thriving.
Did I mention Child 2 runs on a PS5?
Yeah, absurd analogy, I know. But the people are more interested in new things than older things. You might replay older games now and again, but the new thing always takes priority. It takes priority over my backlog, my Switch Online library. Hell, I consider things like hydration to be old and dog shit when certain games come out.
When Breath of the Wild dropped, I went full camel mode. No water, no interruptions, 2 weeks.
So wait, if no one cares about old things, and people debate emulation versus hardware compatibility all the time, and sometimes consoles can't even run these games natively, did I mention that one? The fucking Series X is lauded for its emulation backwards compatibility, but whenever I slot a disc in, I have to download it to the system? What a sick joke! And I don't even own a Series X! But with all those points, and sidetrack, raised, it begs the question, how important really is backwards compatibility?
Incredibly important. The one thing I've negated to mention in that entire long, never-ending ramble is the biggest advantage backwards compatibility has. It's always there. I don't need my PS4 because I know I always have a PS4. It's called my PS5. Whenever I want to play any of these games, my PS5 will always be there, ready to be my PS4. Does that make sense? If my PS4, or hell, every PS4 in the entire world were to go up in a puff of smoke and never exist again, we could still play these PS4 games, because PS5s exist. So all kinds of backwards compatibility is important, no questions about it. Any way to play an official disc is important, in my opinion. Am I going to use it anytime soon though? Probably not. I've got a ton of backlog games to get through before I can return to my comfort zone of playing like 4 or 5 Mario spin-offs in one sitting, so